Welcome to a video tutorial of AuctionRPM. My name is Dan Zumwalt, and I'll be your guide as we discuss mailing label processing in AuctionRPM. You'll notice here on the main menu under Auctions and Marketing, there's an option here entitled Mailing Labels. Clicking on that option will take us into the screen where we can select how we wish to process our mailing labels. To begin with, you'll notice that the first section here is entitled Auction Selection. And after selecting an auction here, we can indicate that we wish to send a mail label or print a mail label to all buyers registered for this auction, or this option is select buyers by inventory categories used in this auction. Now it's important to understand how this second option works here. If I click on Cancel here and I go to Tools and Master Data, then I click on Buyers, we have a listing of all of our buyers that we have in the AuctionRPM system. Selecting a buyer here and hitting Edit, then clicking on the Purchasing tab for that buyer, you'll notice that here on the right hand side there's a listing of inventory categories. This is a list of categories that Joe Buyer has indicated that that he is specifically interested in. Let's say, for instance, that I click on Add here, and Joe has indicated that he's interested in electronics. Well, all I have to do is select electronics, add it to this list here, and now that second option that we were just looking at in the mailing label screen, as well as a few other features that are built into AuctionRPM, will be able to cross-reference the inventory categories that are actually sold in this auction with the categories of inventory that the buyers have specifically indicated that they are interested in. Thus, you would then be able to come up with a hybrid list of buyers that would be uniquely interested in this particular auction. And that's what that second option does there in the mailing label screen. Going back to that screen now, we could again select the auction and select the second option, and then it would do that cross-referencing. And once it selected that buyer, then it would print a mailing label for that buyer. Alternatively, we could come down here and use some of the other features that are here. Now, all of these features, all of these selection criteria that are here, they all work in concert with each other. For instance, I could say that I only want buyers that have indicated that they're interested in electronics, that live in Shreveport, Louisiana, and that have purchased something, let's say with the word TIAC in the description. I could narrow it down that much if I wanted to. I could even say I only want buyers that have attended an auction or won a bid since a particular date. So as a result, you can get very specific as to what buyers you wish to print out mailing labels for. The mailing labels are printed using either one of two options here under the output format area. You could either print the mailing label on an Avery 5160 or 5161. This is a 8x10 sheet of labels that are either 3x10 or 2x10. Or you can send these names that it has selected to an external file. This is a useful feature if you use a third-party envelope stuffing service. Conversely, you can also use this option here, convert last name first to normal format. AuctionRPM recommends that you enter in your buyers with the last name, first name format in the buyer name field. Well, using this checkbox here will cause that format to be reversed so that buyer, Joe would turn out to be Joe Buyer on the actual label that's printed out. Let's hit Cancel here and let's go to Tools, Settings and Defaults and look at a couple settings that directly affect what we're working on here. I'm going to click on Print Settings and then this tab at the top entitled Label Settings. You'll see here that there's an example here of the sheet that is printed out using what we're talking about. The 5160s, of course, are the 3x10 label sheets. 5161s are 2x10, and so the labels come halfway across the sheet. Now, here in these fields over here on the right-hand side, these identify the margins and the spacing that is used on these sheets, because different sheets are spaced differently. Now these default settings are for the 5160s or the 5161s, but you may not be using Avery labels, and if that's the case, the spacing might be slightly different. These fields right here allow you to identify how the spacing works. For instance, the E setting here, this is the distance between this label, and then this label with this label, and so forth. Well, you'll notice here that on the 5161s and the 5160s, that is set to 0. That means that on those label sheets that are printed by Avery, that this label is immediately stacked on top of this one. There is no space between these two labels. If there were, then you would be able to modify that E setting here in order to indicate how far of a distance there was between these two labels. These are decimal representation of inches, and that's what we're looking at here. So for instance, the label height on both the 5160 and the 5161s are 2.250 inches, whereas the B setting, which is the distance, the left and right distance between the labels here, the B setting is 0.188 inches. And so if you need to, you can work with these different settings here in order to make sure that the information that's printed on the labels line up properly. I'll go ahead and hit exit here, and that'll conclude our discussion of the mailing label processing in AuctionRPM. If there's any questions or comments about this video or any others that are presented on the AuctionRPM.com website, please feel free to give us a call. The area code is 209 and the phone number is 588-1232. Thanks for listening.